Hey guys, tonight we follow a wool-hatted stranger stepping off the train into Marseille's 1960s underworld, and he's already watched. A low coastal fog clings to the city's rusted bones. It smells like seawater and cigarette ash. The Gare Saint-Charles huffs steam into the morning air, its great iron lungs exhaling another tired train from Paris. Doors hiss open, shoes tap the platform, and from the third car, someone steps down. A man in a thick wool hat, too warm for the Mediterranean spring. He walks without hurrying, no luggage, just a folded newspaper in one hand and a coat slung over his shoulder. His shoes are polished but not new. His face is pale, shadowed with stubble, and tired in a way that doesn't beg sleep. It warns of old trouble. He doesn't nod, doesn't look, just walks. A boy, no older than 12, watches from behind a newsstand stacked with papers and candy. He's seen travelers before, salesmen, soldiers, even whores dressed as housewives. But this one is different. This one, he thinks, is the kind of man who doesn't stop moving until someone else stops breathing. The wool hat helps. The man crosses the station lobby under marble columns that have seen 100 years of departures and returns. He pauses only once, not to check a schedule, but to let a tall man in a rumpled trench coat pass by. Too eager, too obvious. The man in the hat clocks the trench coat's shoes, the bulge of a sidearm at the hip, the sweat just beginning to form on the collar. He smiles once, faintly, and walks on. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Marseille would have been buzzing by 10 a.m., but maybe it's 2:43 a.m. where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He moves through the city like someone tracing memories, not streets. Past shuttered bakeries, their scents lingering like ghosts. Past alleyways that feel too narrow for cars and too wide for comfort. Marseille is loud in the day. Vendors shouting, mopeds whining, gulls screaming like they've got beef with the wind. But this hour is a hush, a breath held between crime and confession. The man turns onto Rue Tubineau. The buildings here lean toward each other like they're sharing secrets. Half the shops are fronts. Everyone knows it. There's a tailor who hasn't stitched anything in 5 years, and a locksmith who can open anything except his own past. He stops at a cafe. Chez Marius, the sign says, half lit. The kind of place where espresso comes with a side of information. Inside, no music plays. Just the scrape of a chair leg and the creak of an old man behind the counter, wiping glasses that will never be clean. The man in the hat doesn't order. He sits. And Marius, who hasn't asked anyone's name since 1946, nods once and pours a cup. There's a second one, already poured, still steaming. Someone else is coming. She arrives 2 minutes later. Hair dyed red like a warning flare, lips too thin to smile, hands that twitch like she's always ready to grab a purse or a pistol. She calls herself Clarice, though that's no more real than the scar under her left eye. "You're late," she says, lighting a cigarette with the kind of disdain only French women and angry cats have mastered. "You're early," he replies. His voice is slow, syrupy with an accent that doesn't belong anywhere in particular. Could be Corsican, could be Algerian, could be nowhere. They talk about nothing at first. The weather, football, a jazz singer who got stabbed last week outside Le Prado. But it's all a prelude. Finally, she leans in. "He wants to see you, tonight. Rue Dragon, the tailor's place." The man nods as if he already knew. Maybe he did. Most people don't know this, but Marseille in the 1960s was the heroin capital of Europe. The French Connection wasn't just a film, it was real. Opium flowed from Turkey to France, refined in labs hidden in the countryside, then smuggled through the port to the US. But none of that happened without men like him, the enforcers, the silent shapes in the corners of smoky rooms. Outside, a bus backfires. A dog barks. A man yells something about rent. The man in the wool hat finishes his coffee, leaves a coin, and walks out without saying goodbye. Clarice watches him go, then says, to no one in particular, he doesn't blink like other people. Here's a fact. People blink an average of 15-20 times per minute. Le Chapeau, they say, blinked 5. Maybe that's what made him seem untouchable. Or maybe it was something else, something older, buried deeper. At the same time, across the city in a police office that smells like mildew and paper cuts, a young inspector named Galois flips through a file. Inside are photos, grainy, black and white, taken from rooftops and keyholes. In every one, the same man appears. Wool hat, no expression, no name, no priors, Galois mutters. But always where the bodies aren't found. His superior shrugs. Maybe he just drinks a lot of coffee, but he doesn't smoke. So, in Marseille, that's suspicious. It's not the first time someone has tried to pin something on Le Chapeau. And it won't be the last. Many people still think that men like him, enforcers, fixers, ghosts in wool, are born broken. But what if they're forged? Burned hard in wars, in prisons, in alleys where kindness gets you killed. So what do you think? Was he always like this? Or did the city turn him? As dusk stretches its golden arms across the rooftops, the man walks, past the Palais Longchamp, past shuttered music halls, toward a tailor's shop that hasn't sold a suit in years. The wind picks up. A gull screeches overhead, and Le Chapeau smiles once. Not kindly, not cruelly. Just like someone who knows where all the bodies aren't buried. Locals call him Le Chapeau, but no one knows where he came from or who he answers to. Names in Marseille carry weight, sometimes too much. A name here can buy you a drink or buy you a shallow grave. That's why the man in the wool hat never gives his. In bars and alleys, whispers chase him like rats after bread crusts. They call him Le Chapeau, the hat. It's not poetic, but it sticks. He never corrects them. The thing is, you don't just become a ghost in this city. You have to die a few times first. Figuratively, of course. Lose a name, lose a family, lose the part of yourself that flinches when someone screams at night. So where did he come from? Some say Algeria, that he fought in the shadows during the war, slipping between identities like they were coats. Others insist he's Corsican, born in the hills with a rifle in one hand and a vendetta in the other. A few old-timers mutter something about Indochina. Those sunken eyes, they say, are jungle eyes. But none of them know, and that suits him just fine. Tonight, as dusk brushes the windows with blood-orange light, Le Chapeau stands in front of the tailor's shop on Rue Dragon. The shutters are half drawn. A single light glows behind the dusty glass. It flickers, but never dies. He doesn't knock, just opens the door. Inside, it smells like mothballs, tobacco, and old ambition. Bolts of fabric lean against the walls like tired soldiers. A sewing machine sits idle, its needle stuck mid-thought. And behind the counter, folding a jacket that hasn't been worn since de Gaulle's last speech, is him, Mathieu. Mathieu used to run things. Not the whole city, but enough of it. Back when the heroin was still moving through rooftops and wine cellars. before the Americans got wise and started asking questions. He's old now, but not soft. The type of man whose silence speaks fluent violence. "You came," Mathieu says, not looking up. "You called," replies Le Chapeau. Mathieu finally meets his eyes. For a second, the air stills. Two men, both used to getting the last word, measure each other again. "You still wear that hat." "It still fits." A faint chuckle, then business. "There's trouble. The Algerians want more. The Sicilians want in. And the cops, well, they want blood. Doesn't matter whose." Le Chapeau says nothing. He listens. That's his real power, not fists or knives or whatever he's hiding in that coat. It's the silence, the vacuum. People rush to fill it, and when they do, they tell him everything. Mathieu continues. "I need you to talk to someone, or scare him. Your choice." "Who?" "Guy named Reza. He's running things down by the ferry port. Moved in fast. Fast like someone who knows they've got backup." "From where?" Mathieu's mouth twists. "That's the part I don't like." Outside, the city mutters. Mopeds wind down the street. Someone plays a trumpet, badly, from a balcony. Marseille never really sleeps. It just tosses in its sheets. "You want me to scare him?" Le Chapeau asks. "I want you to look at him and let him decide whether to be scared." They don't shake hands. They never have. Here's a real-world fact. During the 1960s, Marseille's underworld wasn't just local. It was international. Corsicans, Algerians, Italians, Greeks, everybody had their piece. But the city itself, that belonged to no one. That's what made it dangerous. Le Chapeau steps back into the night. He walks to the port. The streets get louder here. More music, more sweat. Neon signs flicker over doorways, each one promising things they don't deliver. Girls in cheap dresses lean against doorways. Men in worse suits lean beside them. Everything is for sale, except time. He finds Reza at a bar called Le Couteau Rouillé, the rusty knife. Fitting. Reza is younger than expected. Clean-shaven, thick shoulders, sunglasses indoors. He drinks like someone who's never lost a friend. Or maybe just forgot how. Le Chapeau doesn't sit, doesn't order, just stands beside him and says, "You're in the wrong place." Reza smirks. "Am I? This isn't Tangier, and you're not invisible." Reza doesn't respond right away, just finishes his drink, then turns, slowly. "Are you threatening me?" "No." Reza scoffs. "Then why are you here?" "To see if you scare easily." And there it is. The pause, the flicker behind the sunglasses. Reza laughs, too loud, too fast. But Le Chapeau sees the twitch in his hand, the way he checks the mirror behind the bar, the way his leg bounces beneath the counter. Fear isn't always screaming. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's silent. And in Marseille, silence is the loudest threat of all. Le Chapeau leaves without another word. By the time he's halfway down the street, Reza has already made a call. Back at the tailor shop, Mathieu is pouring a drink. He doesn't look surprised when Le Chapeau walks in. "So?" he asks. "He'll leave, or he'll stay and regret it." "You didn't touch him?" "I didn't have to." Mathieu smiles. "Good." They share a drink. It's not celebratory, just survival. Many people still think Marseille was ruled by gangsters like in the movies. Big personalities, fast cars, shootouts in alleys. But the truth is, most power in this city comes quietly. With a word, a glance, a man who doesn't blink, and another who blinks too much. Later that night, Le Chapeau walks back toward his apartment. It's above a bookstore that only sells poetry and cigarettes. His room is small, clean, no photos, no clocks, just a window facing east and a wool hat resting on the windowsill. He takes it off, and for the first time that day, exhales. He meets with a Corsican fixer in a cafe that doubles as a front, and someone's already listening in. The morning after Reza's pride took a quiet bruise, Marseille pretends like nothing happened. That's the city's charm. It forgets what it should remember, and remembers only what helps it survive. A gull flaps lazily over the old port. Fishmongers swear at crates of sardines. Someone plays an accordion out of tune. Somewhere, probably not far, someone is already lying to the police. Le Chapeau walks toward the south end of Rue Sainte. His pace is always the same, measured, never drawn by urgency, as though he owns every second he spends. At a corner, where the paint flakes off a faded mural of St. George, he slips into a cafe with no name. It's called Chez Paul, unofficially. Paul hasn't run it in years, but names tend to stick in Marseille like humidity. The awning is striped red and white. The espresso machine wheezes like an asthmatic, and the croissants are at least a day old. But the back room? That's where things happen. Inside, he finds Antoine Tonio Luciani, a Corsican fixer whose reputation is half legend, half court testimony. Tonio's hair is slicked back with what might be oil or sweat or ambition. He wears a suit that was once tailored and now tailored again to hide the weight of guilt, paranoia, and one too many meals at midnight. He grins when he sees Le Chapeau. "You're punctual," Tonio says. "I don't like waiting rooms," Le Chapeau replies. They sit in the back. The table is tucked behind a rack of fake wine bottles. No menus, just 2 cups of bitter coffee and a long pause. "You heard about Reza?" Tonio asks. "I heard he has a fast heartbeat now." Tonio chuckles, then lowers his voice. "Good. He was sniffing around our docks, like a stray dog with a rich uncle." Le Chapeau raises an eyebrow. "And what does the uncle want?" "That's what we're trying to find out." As they speak, a man with a newspaper 2 tables away flips a page too slowly. He's got the wrong shoes for a dock worker and the right posture for someone who's paid to be curious. Le Chapeau sees him. So does Tonio, but neither say a word. Let him listen. They've got nothing to hide. Yet, here's something real. The French police during the 1960s kept meticulous notes on Marseille's cafes. Not the food, the faces, the comings and goings. They didn't bother with 5-star restaurants, just places like this. The ones with yellowed curtains and conversations you could sell to the right bidder. Tonio leans forward. "There's more." "Of course there is. The Italians are watching you, not just Reza's people. Sicily, maybe Naples, hard to say. But you've upset someone." Le Chapeau says nothing. "You didn't touch Reza. But someone like you showing up at his bar? That's loud in our world." "You want me to disappear again?" Tonio smirks. "No, I want you to lean in harder. A beat." "Why?" "Because there's something bigger coming. And we need someone the cops can't predict. Someone who doesn't flinch." Le Chapeau finishes his coffee. "You're mistaking mystery for immunity." "I'm not. I'm betting on it." Their eyes hold a moment. 2 men whose hands have broken fingers and promises, who understand that loyalty is often just a well-placed silence. Many people still think Corsican gangs were just local thugs, but they were the architects of France's post-war underworld, meticulous, ruthless, and fluent in the art of the long game. What Tonio is proposing isn't muscle, it's chess. "You'll hear from me soon," Tonio says, rising. "I always do." Tonio exits, giving a faint nod to the man with the newspaper. No need to hide the watchmen if they're already expected. Le Chapeau stays. He lights a cigarette. Not because he smokes, but because it gives him a reason to sit another few minutes. To watch, to wait. Across the street, a woman feeds pigeons. A kid on a bicycle steals a baguette from a vendor. The city keeps moving. And that man with the newspaper, he folds it, rises and leaves, but not without glancing once at Le Chapeau's table. Just a flick of the eye. Enough. Le Chapeau smiles to himself. Sloppy, he thinks. He gets up and walks. He passes the port where salt eats through iron, and the ships are more rumor than business. He sees men play cards beside broken pallets. Children kick a football through puddles that reflect a sky that's forgotten how to be blue. He ends up near Rue de la République at a small barber shop. Inside, an old man nods and says, "Same as usual?" "Always," Le Chapeau replies. He sits. The razor hums. The scissors snip. It's not really about grooming. It's about routine. A ritual. Something to remind him he's still here. Still visible. Still choosing to be seen. The barber asks, "Is it true you made Riza wet himself?" "Not yet." The old man laughs and goes back to cutting. In a drawer behind him are 3 pistols, one rusting. Under the chair is a hollow tile. The kind of place that looks harmless because everyone's decided to pretend it is. Back in the streets, the sun begins to drop behind the hills, casting long cinematic shadows. Marseille always looks better in silhouette, like it's trying to hide something, and in a way it is. Le Chapeau walks toward his apartment. But something changes. A flicker at the edge of instinct. A presence that wasn't there before. He turns a corner too fast. Waits. Nothing, or almost nothing. A scrape, a breath. A figure backs off fast. Wrong posture, wrong timing. Le Chapeau steps into the open, straightens his coat, and says loud enough for whoever it is to hear, "You're going to need better shoes," and walks away. Here's a curious fact. Marseille's cobblestones are uneven in certain districts, so much so that veteran locals can tell a stranger just by the rhythm of their walk. Maybe that's why no one's caught him yet. His rhythm matches the city's. That night, he eats alone. A bowl of soup, a heel of bread. No wine, no music. He stares at the walls, listens to the pipes rattle, and lets silence sit with him like an old friend. He sleeps lightly, not because he's afraid, but because too many years have taught him that peace is always temporary. A dock worker disappears after a whispered argument in the port. Le Chapeau might know why. At dawn, the fog returns, heavier than yesterday. It creeps down from the hills like spilled milk, swallowing rooftops and blanketing the port in a sleepy white hush. Ships honk in the distance, muffled and irritated. The cranes creak. Somewhere, a seagull cries like it's mourning something that hasn't happened yet. Le Chapeau is already walking. He always wakes early. He doesn't set alarms. He simply never lets his guard down long enough to drift deep. Half sleep is all he needs, and half sleep is enough to remember. This morning, his feet take him to the docks, not out of curiosity, but necessity. He doesn't like the sea much, but the docks are where rumors crawl ashore. The stevedores talk, the smugglers drink, the police pretend they see nothing. And if someone disappears, that's not unusual. But today it's someone in particular, a man named Abdel. Abdel was a dock worker, the kind who showed up early, didn't talk much, and carried crates like he carried the weight of 3 wars. Everyone liked him, or at least respected him. But yesterday, he argued with someone, not loudly, not publicly, just a whisper near Dock 4. And then, nothing. He didn't clock out, didn't go home. His wife called around, asking quietly. She doesn't want police, she wants peace. That's how it is in Marseille. People don't scream for justice. They knock on old doors and hope for silence to answer gently. Le Chapeau walks past Dock 4. The usual crew is there, smoking, laughing, betting cigarettes on dice games. But they stop when they see him. "Hey, Chapeau," one calls too casually. He nods but doesn't stop. He circles to the edge, where the water slaps lazily against rusted pylons. A wooden crate floats by, its contents half-soaked and indistinguishable. Probably oranges. or something far less sweet. Then he sees it, a smear, faint. Could be oil, could be something else. He kneels, inspects it with a finger. It's blood, old, but not too old. Footsteps behind him, heavy, cautious. Looking for something? A voice asks. He turns. It's Rashid, a tall man with hands like shovels and a face that's seen too many sunrises from the wrong side of the law. Where's Abdel? Le Chapeau asks softly. Rashid shrugs. Didn't show? You were working with him yesterday. Lots of people were. Only one whispered in his ear. That gets a reaction, a slight tightening of the jaw. Look, Rashid says. He was asking questions about the manifests, about containers that don't get checked. That's not his job. And now? Now he's probably drunk somewhere, or stupid enough to run, or dumped in the water. Rashid meets his gaze. It's not a challenge, it's a test. Le Chapeau doesn't blink. Finally, Rashid grunts and turns away. You know how this works. You dig too deep, you get wet. Here's something real. In the 1960s, Marseille's port was one of the most corrupt in Europe. Customs officers turned blind eyes. Workers loaded and unloaded shipments with no paperwork. And behind every container was a chain of hands, each dirtier than the last. Le Chapeau stands, brushes off his knee. He's not looking for a corpse. He's looking for a signal, and he finds it in the form of a matchbook, half buried behind a stack of pallets. It's from a club called Le Canary Bleu. He flips it open. One word is scrawled inside. Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. He pockets it and leaves the docks. He doesn't say goodbye. Le Canary Bleu isn't far. Nestled in a block where jazz clubs and brothels trade ambiance like poker chips. Its sign flickers. Its curtains are thick. And its clientele? Men with secrets and women who pretend not to hear them. Inside it smells of cologne, desperation, and a saxophone that needs tuning. Le Chapeau doesn't sit. He scans. There. A man at the bar. Trim suit, nervous fingers. Not from Marseille. He approaches. You dropped something, Le Chapeau says, placing the matchbook beside the man's drink. The man turns, eyes wide, no poker face. I don't know what. You were with Abdel. Pause, briefly. You whispered something. He asked questions. And I warned him to stop. Why? Because he was looking at the wrong crate. A breath. Le Chapeau lowers his voice. And what was in the crate? The man leans in. Something that doesn't belong in France. And someone paid a lot to keep it that way. Who? The man opens his mouth, then stops. His eyes flick past Le Chapeau toward the back of the room. Two men in dark coats have just walked in. Not regulars. One has a bulge at the hip. The other's scanning the room too intently. Le Chapeau turns back. The man he was speaking to? Gone. Like vapor. Only the matchbook remains. He doesn't chase. No point. He picks up the matchbook again. This time, he notices something. The handwriting isn't French. It's Arabic. Tunisian dialect, if he's not mistaken. Interesting. Back in the street, the fog is lifting. But the city still feels blurred, as if truth itself is smeared behind glass. Many people still think disappearances are dramatic. Sirens, tears, headlines. But in cities like Marseille, they happen like this. Quietly, invisibly, without echo. A man whispers once, then vanishes. And only the seagulls seem to remember his name. That night, Le Chapeau returns to the dock. He brings no flashlight. He just stands where Abdel stood, and he waits. The tide comes in. The moon rises, and from somewhere deep below, something floats up. It's not a body. It's a glove. Inside it, a small key. A midday brawl in Noir ends in a message being sent to a rival crew, but Le Chapeau keeps his hands clean. By midday, the heat in Marseille begins to press down like a sweaty hand. It turns streets into ovens, tempers into sparks, and vendettas into performance art. The market in Noir is thick with the scent of overripe fruit, cumin, sweat, and rumors. It's where gossip is freshest, alongside the figs. Le Chapeau doesn't shop here, he walks here. Today, he walks with purpose. The glove from the dock still rests on his table, drying beside a bowl of sardines. The key inside it? Small, brass, and old. It doesn't fit anything he owns, which means it fits something someone else wants. And that means movement. But today isn't about keys, it's about timing. Because today, someone is supposed to make a statement in the open. Not a murder, not quite, but a brawl. Loud, messy, public enough to get attention, controlled enough to stay under the police radar. The kind of thing where knuckles crack and nobody dies, unless they're supposed to. It starts near the butcher's stall. A man with a meat hook for a forearm shouts at another man wearing a crimson tie, the sort no sane person wears to a fish market. The shouting becomes shoving. Crates of oranges hit the ground like cannonballs. The crowd backs up, but not too far. Marseille loves a good fight. 2 more men jump in, one with a knife he accidentally drops, another who throws punches like he learned from silent films. A woman shrieks. A baguette gets stepped on. Someone yells something about someone else's mother. And Le Chapeau? He leans against a fruit cart, expression unreadable, watching like it's a bad opera with decent choreography. He doesn't interfere. He doesn't need to. Here's the historical bit. Marseille's criminal underworld often used markets, particularly Noir, as neutral zones. If you needed to send a signal, you did it where everyone could see, but no one could prove. Police reports would list disturbance due to intoxicated patrons, and the message would still be delivered. The fight ends quickly. The man in the crimson tie limps away, blood in his hair, not his own probably. The others vanish into the maze of alleyways like cats after a thunderclap. A young boy, barefoot, barely 10, approaches Le Chapeau with a folded note. He hands it over and vanishes without waiting for a coin. The paper smells faintly of cloves, written in blocky, nervous French. I did what you asked, he'll remember. Le Chapeau folds it, tucks it into his coat, doesn't react, because here's the thing. He didn't ask for that brawl. Not directly. But someone, maybe Rashid, maybe Tonio, took it upon themselves to escalate. And now blood has touched the market floor, which means things are accelerating. Later that afternoon, he visits Madame Hélène, not because he wants company, but because he needs to feel a different kind of silence. She lives in an apartment above a shuttered theater, the kind of place where ghosts might go to smoke. Her hair is silver, swept up in a style that hasn't been fashionable since the last war. She greets him with a cigarette and a look that says, "You again? You heard?" he asks. "I always do." They sit, drink vermouth. She plays an old jazz record, scratchy, warm, the kind that makes the city sound farther away. "Do you regret it?" she asks suddenly. "What?" "Being the message instead of the messenger." He doesn't answer. Instead, he places the key on the table. She raises an eyebrow. "That's not from today's mess." "No, it's from yesterday's ghost." She picks it up, turns it in her fingers. "This is for something old. I think it's a locker." "At the station?" He nods once. "Then don't go alone. I never do." She smirks. "You're always alone." He doesn't argue. Many people still think that gangsters like Le Chapeau crave violence. But the truth is often sadder. Most of them are simply waiting for it, trained by survival to anticipate it like bad weather. And when it comes, they don't run. They open umbrellas made of memory and move on. That night, the newspapers barely mention the market fight. A single line in the police blotter. Minor disturbance near Rue Longue des Capucins. No arrests. But in the right circles, everyone knows. The man with the crimson tie was connected to a Sicilian crew recently sniffing around the spice trade, an old racket with new players. The message was clear. Stay out of Noir. Whether the man got the message? We'll find out soon. Back in his apartment, Le Chapeau sharpens a pencil. Not a knife. A pencil. He draws a small map on the back of a receipt, one that leads from the docks to the cafe to the locker rooms of Saint Charles Station. He marks an X near locker 78. Just before midnight, a pigeon lands on his windowsill. No note, just staring. He stares back, and for a moment, everything is still. You probably wouldn't survive this, you know. This pace, this quiet dread. The way every street corner might offer either a friend or a funeral. The way messages aren't written. They're acted out in broad daylight while the police order lunch across the street. But Le Chapeau, he thrives in it. Tomorrow he'll visit the locker. Tonight he listens to the pipes rattle. And downstairs, in the bookstore below, someone buys a collection of Neruda poems. The city keeps turning. A quiet sit-down reveals Le Chapeau's ties to the post-war Corsican networks and what he owes them. The next morning tastes of iron and old water. Rain has fallen in the night, but Marseille doesn't shine when it's wet. It just smells more like what it hides. Rust, salt, and regret. Le Chapeau walks through the puddled streets toward Parc Longchamp. The statues outside the palace stare down at the city like disappointed ancestors. It's too early for tourists, too late for ghosts. But not for business. He meets Tonio beneath a stone arch draped in ivy. No handshakes, just two men sitting on a bench, watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs and territory. I remember this park when it was clean, Tonio mutters. I don't, Le Chapeau replies. They sit in silence for a while. Then Tonio speaks. You owe people, Chapeau. You know that. I owe a lot of people. You'll have to be more specific. Tonio lights a cigarette. He doesn't offer one. Corsica, the old boys, the ones who don't leave the island anymore. They remember you. I remember them. They say you disappeared after the 56 job. Left bodies and unpaid debts. I left lies. The bodies stayed where they were. Tonio exhales smoke like he's blowing out a bad memory. Some of them are asking for favors, which is how you ended up as messenger. I volunteered. Thought you might listen to someone who knew your real name. Le Chapeau says nothing, but the silence hardens. Tonio continues. They want something moved. Small. Valuable. Not drugs. Then what? Documents. Real ones? Real enough to matter. Here's your historical fact. After World War II, Corsican gangs were deeply entangled with French intelligence. Some say they helped suppress communist movements in Marseille with CIA knowledge. Others whisper that France turned a blind eye to the heroin trade in exchange for favors during Algeria and Indochina. The truth? Tangled, as always. Tonio pulls a small envelope from his coat. He sets it on the bench. It's not a job, it's a reminder. I haven't forgotten, Le Chapeau says, eyes on the pigeons. They think you have. You're getting soft. Is that why they sent you? No. They sent me because you once pulled a bullet from my thigh in a Tunisian alley and didn't ask why it was there. Le Chapeau almost smiles, almost. They sit a few minutes more, then part like strangers. He doesn't open the envelope, not yet. Instead, he walks the long way back, through narrow side streets painted in chipped graffiti, past a bakery that sells yesterday's bread and today's rumors, past a church where old women pray harder than they should have to. At home, he opens the envelope. Inside is a single photo, black and white, faded. 3 men on a beach. One is Tonio, younger and cockier. One is a Corsican man named Pascal, now dead. The third is Le Chapeau, before the hat, before the silence. Shirtless, holding a rifle, smiling. On the back, someone has written, "We remember." He burns the photo in a chipped ashtray, watches the edges curl, then turn to ash. But memory? Memory stays. That afternoon, he visits a barber shop, not his usual one. This one is in Belle de Mai, tucked behind a burned-out cinema. No name, no hours, just a striped pole that hasn't spun in years. Inside, the barber nods. You here for the past or the future? He asks. Both, Le Chapeau says. He sits. The man doesn't cut much, just trims. Just enough to make a man think he's shedding something. They talk in short bursts, old names, old towns. The kind of coded conversation where each sentence is a key. Finally, the barber says, You know what they really want, right? Tell me. They want you to come back. To Corsica? To the cause, or what's left of it. I'm not good at causes anymore. You never were. But you were good at finishing things. Many people still think gangsters are born loyal. But loyalty, in places like this, is a debt with no end date. You can leave, sure. But the tab keeps running. And when they come to collect, it's never in cash. That evening, he opens the locker. Saint Charles Station hums with the noise of motion, trains sighing, announcements echoing, tired feet dragging across tile. Locker 78 is scratched and dented. The key turns with a metallic cough. Inside, a wooden box, small, heavy, no markings. He doesn't open it there. He takes it to the roof of a parking garage 3 blocks away, just in case. Inside the box, papers, old ones, birth certificates, passports, deeds to land in Algeria, Tunisia, Corsica. Names he recognizes, some long dead, some very much alive. It's leverage, blackmail, power, and now it's his. He returns to his apartment without touching a single page. Instead, he makes a phone call. From a payphone, of course. Tonio answers. What's in the box? Tonio asks. History. And what are you going to do with it? Hold it. For how long? As long as they remember who I am. The line clicks dead. Outside, the wind picks up. Blows in from the sea, cold and sharp. Le Chapeau walks back slowly, and for once he lets himself remember. The beach, the rifle, the laughter, and the moment he decided he could never be that man again. As police tail the city's dawns, Le Chapeau dances just outside the reach of French law enforcement. The next morning, Inspector Gallois watches from a black Citroën parked beneath a fig tree that sheds more fruit than leaves. He has one hand on the steering wheel and the other on a camera with a cracked viewfinder. Across the street, the cafe buzzes with harmless noise. Cups clinking, spoons scraping, and the occasional gasp when someone sees the price of wine has gone up again. Gallois isn't watching the cafe. He's watching the man 2 tables back. The one who never looks up from his coffee. The one who's been reported in 3 separate police precincts under 5 different descriptions. Tall, not tall, North African, Corsican, maybe once Parisian. The only consistent detail, the wool hat. Le Chapeau, Gallois mutters. You slippery bastard. The inspector's partner, Durand, crunches into a hard baguette beside him. We've got him this time. No, Gallois replies. We have him when he wants us to. Inside the cafe, Le Chapeau stirs his coffee exactly 3 times. It's not superstition. It's control. He notices Gallois' car in the reflection of the sugar jar. He doesn't react, just leans back and listens to the table behind him, where 2 dock workers gossip like teenagers in detention. Did you hear about the locker? What locker? The one near Saint Charles. Something's missing. Police? Worse, Tonio. Le Chapeau smiles into his cup. Rumors beat headlines in Marseille, and today he doesn't even have to start them himself. He stands, drops a coin on the table, and walks out without looking at the Citroën. Gallois lifts his camera, snaps 1 photo. Blurry, like always. Historical fact break. The French police in the 1960s were notorious for failing to pin charges on key underworld figures, especially in Marseille, where organized crime overlapped with politics, shipping, and intelligence agencies. Files went missing. Witnesses disappeared. And sometimes the criminals knew the law better than the lawmen. Le Chapeau walks toward the public gardens near Palais Longchamp, hands in pockets. Not because he's relaxed, but because pockets make people underestimate you. Nobody thinks a man with his hands in his coat will move fast, but he will. At a park bench, an old man feeds pigeons. He used to be a lawyer. Now he's a leak. They're getting desperate, he mutters without looking. Who? Le Chapeau asks. The police. They think you're the key to collapsing half the Corsican structure. I'm not. The man chuckles. Exactly, which is why they're worried. They want to bring me in. They want you to panic. And when you don't, they start panicking instead. Le Chapeau leaves him with a piece of bread and no thanks. Back in Galois' car, tension simmers. You ever wonder, Galois says to Durand, why this guy has never been booked? Not even a night in holding? Maybe he's lucky. No one's that lucky. Durand chews slower. Galois continues, voice low, conspiratorial. I checked old files. Some of them are redacted. Entire pages gone. One report, Indochina. Another, Corsica. This man's either a ghost or he's protected. By who? Galois doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. The silence says, by someone bigger than us. That evening, Le Chapeau takes a walk through Le Panier, the oldest neighborhood in Marseille. The streets are too narrow for cars, perfect for conversations that echo down the stone. He stops in front of a mural that wasn't there last week. A blue-eyed woman with gold earrings and a cigarette clenched between her lips. Underneath, in sprayed paint, L'œil vous regarde. The eye is watching. He smiles. Not very subtle. A woman walks by with groceries. She glances at him like she recognizes him, but not from anywhere good. He walks on. At a small corner shop, he buys a bottle of mineral water and a postcard. He doesn't need either, but he's testing the clerk's reaction. When she takes his coin, she glances once under the counter. Gun? Wiretap? Or just a bad habit? He doesn't care. He leaves before she makes a choice. That night, Galois gets a call. The voice on the other end is filtered through enough distortion to sound like it's being broadcast from the ocean floor. Stop following Le Chapeau, the voice says. I don't take orders from ghosts, Galois snaps. No, but you've filed reports to people who do. Click. Dial tone. Many people still think the criminal justice system is about justice. But in cities like this, it's often about leverage. Who has it? Who's owed it? And who can turn it into silence? So what do you think? Would you keep chasing a man the government might be quietly protecting? Galois thinks long and hard that night, then reopens the file on Le Chapeau. Inside, 5 photos, all blurry. 1 fingerprint card, never verified. A list of associates, half of whom are either dead or missing. He writes 2 words across the cover, no action, closes the file, locks it in his desk, and pours himself a drink. Elsewhere, Le Chapeau sits on a rooftop with a view of the sea. Not for romance, for exit routes. The bottle of mineral water rests beside him, unopened. He flips the postcard over and begins to write. I am still here. No address, no name. He'll leave it in the wind, because in Marseille, words on paper are more dangerous than bullets. And he's learned that the best way to avoid getting caught is to never run. He shares secrets, and maybe more, with a faded chanteuse who knows Marseille's sins by name. The door to her apartment creaks like an old stage curtain, the kind that remembers applause but hasn't heard it in years. Le Chapeau steps inside with the same quiet confidence he brings everywhere. But here, it softens just a little. The way someone walks into a church, not because they believe, but because they remember believing once. Madame Hélène lives on the 3rd floor above a forgotten theater. The lobby below still holds the ghosts of velvet chairs and half-whispered lines. Her apartment is full of dust, records, and regret. And yet, it feels alive. She's standing by the window when he enters, framed in the last light of the day. cigarette in one hand, wine in the other. Her silver hair pulled into a loose bun. She doesn't turn. "You look tired," she says. "I've been listening too much." "To who?" "To everyone." She takes a drag. That's the problem with silence. It gives you room to hear too much. He hangs his coat, places his hat gently on the shelf. Here, he doesn't need it. Or maybe it simply doesn't matter. The record on the player is scratchy jazz from an American quartet no one remembers. It sounds like longing. They sit. He on the couch that dips too far in the middle. She in a cracked leather armchair that smells of years. She pours him a glass of whatever red she's drinking. No label, no year. Probably Corsican. "You're being followed again," she says. "I always am. These ones don't wear suits. They wear sneakers and cheap cologne. New blood, or someone pretending to be. They sip. The city outside hums. Gulls, mopeds, murmured arguments through open shutters. Then she asks, "Do you ever miss Corsica?" "No." "Liar." He says nothing, just swirls his glass. "I miss singing," she admits after a moment. "I miss the way people looked at me before they learned to look through me." "You were famous. I was wanted. It's not the same." Here's a slice of real history. Before the war, Marseille had a thriving cabaret scene. Women like Helene, real or imagined, sang in smoky halls to dock workers and dreamers. Some were lovers of gangsters. Some were gangsters. And when the war ended, many were left behind by both fame and the men who bought it. Helene walks to the window, looks down at the street where life moves in layers. "You're still in deep," she says. "I never got out." "Why not?" "Because people like me are useful until we're not. And the only way to stay useful is to stay dangerous." She turns. "Then what are you doing here?" He doesn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he says, "You still keep the files?" She nods toward a shelf of old sheet music. Behind the Chopin, he pulls it open. Sheet after sheet of lyrics hides folders. Slim, handwritten dossiers. Names, faces, old alliances, debts, favors. He finds one labeled Ziani. "Don't touch that," she warns. "Why?" "Because if he finds out you're looking, he'll want something in return. Or someone. I need to know who he talks to." "No one talks to Ziani. They confess, then they disappear." Le Chapeau tucks the folder back. Helene studies him. "You're getting sloppy." "I'm getting older." "Same thing." She pours more wine. The bottle's almost gone. "You sleep here tonight," she says. Not a question. Not quite a command either. He nods once. Not because he needs to, but because he doesn't want to leave. She lays out a sheet on the couch while humming something from a melody he doesn't recognize. "You remember who you were before the hat?" she asks. "Sometimes." "And who was that?" "A man who believed secrets could stay buried." Poor fool. They sit by the window for a while. The city quiets just a little. The sea sends a breeze in like a sigh. And for a few minutes, the world feels small enough to hold between two hands. Many people still think the underworld is all guns and betrayal, but so much of it lives in these quiet spaces. A touch, a glance, a shared memory that keeps two people from falling apart. So what do you think? Can someone like him ever be known, even here? Later, in the dark, she leans her head on his shoulder. Not a move of romance, one of exhaustion, familiarity. A woman who's seen the worst in him and still lets him sleep near her old piano. "I dream about Paris sometimes," she murmurs. "But when I wake up, it's always Marseille. Paris wouldn't survive us." "No," she says, half asleep. "But at least the wine was better." He watches her sleep for a while, then gets up, walks to the shelf again. He doesn't open the Ziani file, but he takes it, slips it into his coat, because whatever Ziani is planning, it's already circling the city like a shark. And Le Chapeau, he's either the bait or the hook. A failed arms run through Tangier ties Marseille's crime to North Africa's independence movements. 3 days later, A cargo vessel called Le Béarnais limps into Marseille's port. The name is painted over rust, the kind that creeps like mold and tells a better story than the registry books ever could. The crew looks nervous. The ship's manifest lists textiles from Morocco. What it doesn't list is what the customs officer doesn't bother asking about, because in Marseille, the real cargo is always unspoken. Le Chapeau watches from a rooftop, binoculars pressed lightly against his eyes. He doesn't care about the cloth. He cares about the man walking down the gangplank with too clean a shirt and too bad a limp. His name is Karim Jaoui, and Karim was supposed to bring weapons, except he didn't. Not all of them anyway. 2 crates are missing. Gone somewhere between Tangier and here. Lost, stolen, or rerouted, no one's sure. But the people who paid for those crates are getting impatient. And patience is expensive in this line of work. Le Chapeau puts the binoculars down, walks away. That night, he meets Tonio in a boxing gym near Castellane. The place smells like blood, leather, and pride. The kind of gym where champions are born and then forgotten with equal speed. Tonio isn't working out. He's watching 2 young men spar with more rage than skill. He lost the shipment, Tonio says flatly. Le Chapeau doesn't ask how he knows. Information moves faster than cargo in this city. Karim says he got stopped in Gibraltar. By who? He says it was customs, Spanish. But I think it was political. Le Chapeau raised an eyebrow. You think he cut a deal? I think someone else needed those guns more than we did. Here's a real-world wrinkle. During the late 1950s and early 60s, French intelligence and organized crime frequently found themselves on either side of the North African independence struggles. Groups like the FLN and the OAS, both nationalistic, both violent, were known to trade in weapons, secrets, and assassinations. And ports like Tangier and Marseille, perfect places to swap crates and lies. Tonio leans in. You ever hear of a man named Bachir Lounès? Le Chapeau nods slowly. Algerian. Used to run with the Corsicans before the war turned him. He's back in Morocco, running ops for someone. Maybe FLN. Maybe not. Maybe someone worse. He take the crates? Not personally, but the crates are in Casablanca now, and we're holding the bill. And Karim? He's hiding. Le Chapeau doesn't ask where. He knows. That night, he finds Karim in a hostel near the harbor. The kind of place where the doors don't lock and the walls are painted the same color as neglect. Karim opens the door half an inch, sees him, freezes. You're not supposed to be here, Karim says. Neither are the crates, Le Chapeau replies. Karim lets him in slowly. The room smells of cheap tobacco and wet fabric. There's a map on the table. Lines drawn from Algiers to Tangier to Marseille. You sold them? Le Chapeau asks. No, I rerouted them. Why? Because the people paying for them wanted to use them for Marseille. For France. The ones I gave them to? They need them for something bigger. You think ideals make you immune? Karim slumps onto the bed. I'm tired of smuggling death for other people's cities. You'll still die in one. Silence. Then Karim speaks, low and shaking. Lounès offered me triple. I took it. They're going to use the weapons to hit a French military outpost near the Algerian border. That blood's not on my hands. It is now. Le Chapeau leaves without threats. He doesn't need to make them. The look in his eyes delivers more than any bullet could. Many people still think organized crime is apolitical. But in the real world, crime often walks hand in hand with revolution. Arms deals don't ask about causes. They ask about volume, price, and which border you're most willing to lie at. Back at Madame Helene's, he opens the Ziani file. It contains names, some French, some North African, shipments, dates, and a photograph of Karim, younger, laughing with men who are now either dead or in government. He closes it, burns it, then walks to the balcony. Below, Marseille sings its usual lullaby. Cars, sirens, lovers arguing about nothing. But tonight, it feels heavier, because something is shifting. Not just gangs, ideologies, borders. And in the middle of it all, men like Le Chapeau. Tools left over from wars that were never really finished. He makes a call from a payphone 2 blocks down. Tonio answers. "You were right," Le Chapeau says. "It's political. We going to get the guns back?" "No." "Then what?" "We watch, we wait, and we make sure none of it reaches our side of the water." Too late for that. Le Chapeau doesn't argue, just hangs up and listens to the dial tone like it's the last honest sound left in the world. An entire shipment goes up in flames, but only one man dies, and it's personal. Midnight settles on Marseille like an old friend who overstays his welcome. Loud in places, quiet in others, but always bringing trouble. Down by the docks, smoke snakes into the sky from the east end of a forgotten warehouse lot. The flames are slow, deliberate, licking the rafters in a way that tells everyone watching. This wasn't an accident. Firefighters arrive late, too late, and when they do, there's not much left but charred beams, the smell of diesel, and one very dead body curled near what used to be a shipping crate. Le Chapeau stands across the street, in the shadow of an abandoned crane. He doesn't need to be close. He already knows what's inside the crate. Or rather, was inside. It's empty now, burned hollow like a lie exposed too soon. The body, it belongs to a man named Jules Vernet, a name the city knows, a name he knows. They served together once, if you could call it that. 2 ghosts in military fatigues, trading favors for secrets in Algeria. Vernet was younger then, cockier, had a scar under his left eye and a way of making everyone else feel expendable. He dealt in maps, bribes, and betrayal. Useful, if not trustworthy. And now he's cooked. Literally. Le Chapeau lights a cigarette, the flame dancing softly under his hat's brim, a voice behind him. "Didn't think you'd come." It's Galois, the inspector, tie loosened, eyes tired. "I don't come for the police," Le Chapeau says. "I come for the dead." Galois doesn't flinch. "You knew him?" "Knew of him. Any idea who would want him roasted like a Sunday chicken?" "Too many to list. Fewer to actually follow through." Galois walks closer. "You know what was in those crates?" "No." "Neither do we. But someone made sure no one else would either." He pulls out a small black notebook. 2 nights ago, this Vernet, he was seen near the port with someone matching your description. Le Chapeau turns to him, eyes level. "I'm a popular silhouette. You're not denying it. I never do." Here's a historical footnote worth knowing. Post-war Marseille was full of men like Vernet, ex-military, ex-useful, ex-human in some ways. The French state used them during the Algerian War, then discarded them like broken bayonets. Most turned to crime. Others became informants. A few became corpses. Le Chapeau walks away from the flames. Galois doesn't follow. He just watches. The next day, Tonio sends word. A note slid under a flower pot on a windowsill. Le Chapeau passes every Thursday. The message is short. It wasn't the shipment they were after. It was the ledger. That night, he returns to the ruins of the warehouse. The fire's out, but the scent clings to the walls. Charcoal, oil, and something else. Grudge. He sifts through the rubble like an archaeologist, unearthing regrets. Finds a melted pen, a twisted door hinge, and near the back corner, half a page of something that didn't burn completely. It's a list. Just one name remains. Vernet, 5K advance, 15K on delivery. So he was the middleman, and someone made sure the message was loud. Only one name. But enough. He pockets the paper, brushes ash from his coat. Back at Madame Helen's, the piano is playing itself. Well, almost. She presses keys absent-mindedly, not caring about melody. Just noise. "Something's happened," she says without turning. "Yes. Do I want to know?" "No." She stops playing, then pour the wine. They drink in silence. The air is thick with smoke that's traveled from the docks to their lungs without permission. She asks, "Was it personal?" I think it became personal. How? Because they knew I would find him, or because they wanted you to. That thought lingers. He pulls the charred paper from his pocket and hands it to her. She reads the name, nods, doesn't ask questions, but he can tell she remembers Jules too. "Was he worth it?" she asks. "No, but you'll still follow the trail." He nods. Many people still think revenge is loud. But in Marseille, it wears quiet shoes and walks behind you until it's too late to turn around. So what do you think? Did they kill Vernet to erase him, or to lure someone else into the fire? That night, he walks along the Rue Sainte-Victoire, where the street lamps flicker like dying thoughts. He stops at a small church, steps inside, not to pray, to remember, because Jules Vernet wasn't just a name, he was leverage. And leverage once burned becomes something else, debt. He kneels, not for God, but for memory. And then he walks out again, into the wind. The city doesn't sleep, but it turns over in its bed. Le Chapeau becomes the unofficial mediator in a growing turf war between ex-gendarmes and Corsican loyalists. There are days in Marseille when the city feels like it's holding its breath. Today is one of them. A breeze slides in from the sea, too weak to cool, too strong to ignore. The city listens, windows cracked open, shopkeepers squinting at passers-by, even the gulls quieter than usual. Something's about to break, but no one wants to be the one to say it. Le Chapeau seats in a cafe on Rue Breteuil that smells of burnt toast and old leather. He orders nothing, just lights a cigarette and watches the chairs. He's waiting for two men. One arrives early, Claude Bresson, retired gendarme, gray suit, shaved head, the kind of handshake that starts wars. He sits without greeting. The other arrives late, Paolo Conti, Corsican loyalist, hair slicked back, gold ring on every finger except the one that's missing. He doesn't shake hands, just nods. Le Chapeau looks at them both, then speaks. "You've got a shared problem." Bresson snorts. "We've got a Corsican problem." Paolo grins. "No, mon ami, you've got a memory problem." Le Chapeau raises a hand. "You both have turf, but someone's cutting through it. Fast, and not carefully." He places a matchbox on the table. The logo is from a bar that neither of them owns, but both have had men beaten outside of. That bar is now controlled by Reza's old crew, but Reza is gone, and someone else is pulling strings. Bresson leans in. "Your point? You're both being squeezed. One street at a time. If you don't talk now, you'll be talking later, with blood." Here's your history drop. By the late 1960s, Marseille saw a dangerous shift. Ex-police and military figures who'd operated above the law during the Algerian War returned home jobless but still armed, with training, grudges, and contacts. Many slid into organized crime. Others formed their own rogue factions. Either way, the line between order and anarchy blurred. Paolo breaks the silence first. "We've already lost Rue Saint-Pierre." Bresson nods. "And two of my boys went missing after a raid on a game den last week. Found one with his ears removed. The other's just gone." Le Chapeau taps ash into a saucer. "Someone's provoking you both, testing how far you'll let things go." "Why come to you?" Bresson asks. "You're not neutral." "I'm not emotional," Le Chapeau replies. "Which is more useful," Paolo chuckles. He's right. None of us can afford another war. "Then sit down," Le Chapeau says. "Draw lines, share streets, or at least pretend long enough to kill the third hand." Bresson scowls. "What if the third hand is Corsican?" Paolo's eyes narrow. Le Chapeau sighs. "Then shake hands before you draw your knives." They sit there for an hour. No yelling, no decisions. But when they leave, it's separately and without threats, which is a start. That night, Le Chapeau visits Madame Hélène again. She pours him tea this time. Chamomile, no wine. That's how serious it is. You look tired, she says. I'm collecting favors. That sounds expensive. It's worse when they come due. She hands him a sealed envelope. This came for you. No name, no stamp. Just left with the concierge. He opens it. Inside, a grainy photo of a man in a police uniform shaking hands with someone behind a black car. The photo is labeled simply 1972, Algiers. The man on the right? It's Bresson. Le Chapeau folds it carefully. You think he's dirty? She asks. No, but I think he buried something. And now someone's digging it up. Many people still think that crime is about money. But in places like Marseille, it's often about memory. Wars end, but the debts they incur don't. So, what do you think? Can two men who've killed in uniform truly learn to share a sidewalk? The next morning, there's blood on the hood of a Renault parked outside the police station. No body, just blood, and a pair of ears in a handkerchief. Le Chapeau receives no call. He doesn't need one. He walks to the site, stands by the car, watches as Galois shakes his head in disbelief. Is this them sending a message? Galois asks. No, Le Chapeau says. This is someone making a point. You know who? I know what they want. And? They want Bresson and Paolo to fall back into old habits. Galois spits. Which means more work for me? Le Chapeau shrugs. No one said being irrelevant would be peaceful. That evening, he walks alone near the sea. In his pocket, the photo. In his coat, the addresses of two men who no longer want to share a city. And in his head, a simple truth. Mediators don't last long, especially when they start caring which side wins. A street urchin delivers more than messages. He becomes Le Chapeau's accidental conscience. There's a knock on Le Chapeau's door. 3 short, sharp taps, followed by 2 more. Not the police, not Tonio. Too rhythmic, too brave. He opens it. A boy stands there, no older than 10, with a mop of black hair and shoes that don't match. In one hand, a wrinkled envelope. In the other, half a baguette with bite marks that suggest he eats like he lives. Fast, nervous, and without ceremony. You're Le Chapeau? The boy asks. Who's asking? The one delivering this. He holds out the envelope like it's a grenade with the pin half pulled. Le Chapeau takes it, doesn't open it yet. What's your name? The boy shrugs. Don't have one. Everyone's got one. Not if no one says it. Le Chapeau stares at him for a moment, then nods toward the hallway. You hungry? The boy eyes him. You got butter? No. Then I'm not hungry. He closes the door without entering. Le Chapeau opens the envelope. Inside is a photo. Surveillance, likely. It shows Madame Hélène stepping out of her building. The angle is tight, shot from across the street. Whoever took it was close. On the back, just one word written in a tight, all-caps scrawl. Choose. He looks up. The boy hasn't left. He's still standing outside the door. Who gave this to you? Le Chapeau asks. A man. What kind of man? The kind that doesn't look at kids when he talks to them. Did he say anything? He said if I don't give it to you, he'll make me disappear like my brother. That freezes the air. What happened to your brother? Same thing that happens to all kids who carry things too long. Here's a real fact that might chill your coffee. In 1960s Marseille, orphans and street children were often used as couriers, lookouts, even pickpockets for organized crime. They weren't just victims, they were pawns, disposable, invisible, and too clever for their own good. Le Chapeau couche. What's your name? The boy stares at him for a long time. Finally, says Leo. All right, Leo. If anyone ever tells you to deliver something again, you come to me first. Why? Because I'll make sure you're not next. The boy chews on that, then asks, Is this how you started? Le Chapeau doesn't answer. Leo nods like he understands anyway. They sit for a moment. The hallway smells of dust and boiled cabbage. Somewhere in the building, an old man coughs like he's chasing something that won't come out. Le Chapeau offers the boy a coin. Leo takes it, then pulls something else from his pocket. A matchbook. Familiar logo. This was in my pocket when I woke up. I didn't put it there. Le Chapeau flips it open. Inside a date. Vendredi 14h. It's tomorrow. He pockets it, looks at Leo again. You've done more than enough. I know. Then the boy walks away. But something shifts in Le Chapeau's posture. A rare thing. A crack in the concrete. Compassion, maybe. Or just fatigue. He doesn't sleep that night. He goes to Madame Helene's. She opens the door in her robe, hair unpinned, eyes heavy. You've brought a shadow, she says. No, just more ghosts. They sit. He shows her the photo. She doesn't flinch. I knew they'd come eventually. I didn't think they'd send warnings. You always think they'll skip the poetry, but it's Marseille. Even our death threats wear cologne. He laughs softly, then pulls out the matchbook. They want me to meet them. Friday, 2 p.m. She lights a cigarette. You'll go? I have to. Alone? I always go alone. Many people still think crime is a solitary game. But the truth is, the further you go, the more shadows you collect. And some of those shadows start asking you uncomfortable questions. Like why? So what do you think? When does a message runner become something more? The next day, Le Chapeau walks the city with Leo in mind. He buys a sandwich, doesn't eat it, leaves it on a bench in noir. By evening, the boy's sitting there, tearing it apart piece by piece, eyes sharp as ever. Le Chapeau nods from across the street, says nothing, just watches, then disappears into the crowd. Tomorrow is Friday, and someone wants him to choose. Between what, he isn't sure. But the fact they used a child to send the message, that makes the choice feel easier. A nighttime walk leads to a quiet execution, and a very loud message to a Paris rival. The city glows faintly under the murk of low clouds. Street lamps flicker like thoughts half held. It's Thursday night, just past 11. The time in Marseille when respectable people are in bed and the real negotiations begin. Le Chapeau walks alone. He moves through Boulevard Michelet with the quiet grace of a man who's memorized every crack in the sidewalk. The air is thick with the scent of diesel and grilled sardines. Somewhere a radio plays Charles Aznavour too loud for this hour, and somewhere else, a man screams without anyone answering. The street bends around the old tram line. That's where it happens. A figure steps from the alley, tall, slender, wearing a coat that once belonged to a Paris tailor and now smells like Marseille crime. Chapeau, the man says. His accent is too clean, too northern. Le Chapeau says nothing, just watches. I bring a message, the man continues. From Dumas. A pause, then a faint smirk. You remember him, yes? Dumas, the Parisian lion who once tried to tame Marseille with cash and lawyers. The man who sent envoys instead of soldiers, and who underestimated how this city prefers blunt tools. Le Chapeau speaks. I remember he owed Tonio 5 kilos of heroin in a man's left hand. The messenger chuckles. And now he offers peace. Does he offer the hand? No. Then it's not peace. A pause. The man shifts his weight. His coat sways slightly. Just enough for Le Chapeau to see the outline beneath. A pistol. Too new. Too clean. He sighs. You're not here to negotiate. No, the man says. I'm here to end your relevance. Then you brought the wrong shoes. The shot is soft, muffled, precise, but it doesn't come from the Parisian. It comes from the roof. A single bullet tears down at a diagonal. The man stumbles, falls, doesn't scream, just blinks once, surprised, as if his story didn't end the way he wrote it. Le Chapeau walks over, kneels. The man's eyes flutter. What? I didn't come alone, Le Chapeau says softly. He stands, looks up to the roofline. A figure nods once, then disappears into the shadows. Here's your historical tie-in. In the late 1960s, tensions between Marseille and Parisian criminal networks escalated quietly. Turf wars were no longer fought with armies of men. but with whispers, disappearances, and precision killings. Marseille resented Paris. Paris misunderstood Marseille. And in the space between, bodies hit the ground. Le Chapeau drags the corpse into the alley, leaves it beneath a billboard for cigarettes no one buys anymore. Then he opens the man's coat. Inside a dossier, files, photos, names, and one address, Madame Helene's. He folds the papers, burns them in a trash bin outside a bakery closed for the season. The fire lights his face softly, enough to show he's tired, really tired, not from running, from remembering. Back at his apartment, he sits with the lights off. The silence folds over him like an old coat. Then a knock, one long, two short. Leo. He opens the door. The boy holds a newspaper. Look, he says, front page, body found in South Marseille. Suspected gang violence. Below, a blurry photo of the alley. They didn't get his face, but Le Chapeau sees the edge of his own coat in the background. You were there, weren't you? Leo asks. I was passing by. Leo doesn't believe him. Will there be more bodies? Le Chapeau doesn't answer. The boy nods. I want to help.
No.
Why not? Because you're not a weapon. Neither are you. Le Chapeau stares at him. The kind of look that ends most conversations. But Leo doesn't flinch. Instead, he hands over a matchbook. Another one. Inside, this time. Next time, we don't miss. Who gave this to you? Leo shrugs. Slipped it into my pocket while I was stealing oranges. Le Chapeau pockets it. Closes the door gently. Many people still think that a clean hit sends a loud message. But sometimes, it's the near miss that shakes the ground more. So what do you think? Was the killing tonight a warning? Or just the start? He walks to Madame Helene's. She's awake. Has been for hours. I heard the shot, she says. I was there. Did it end something? No, it opened something. He tells her about the address in the dossier. She goes pale. Dumas wouldn't dare. He already did. She finishes her drink. What now? We get to him first. And if we don't? Le Chapeau puts on his coat. Then Marseille writes another name in its alley walls. Outside, the wind rises. The streets darken, and the sea begins to whisper. A visiting gangster from Chicago gets in over his head with French timing and Marseille pride. The man from Chicago arrives on a Tuesday morning flight from Orly, wearing a tan suit that doesn't belong in this city, and sunglasses that look like they were stolen off a movie set. His name, at least the one he gives, is Jimmy Stacks Santarelli. He's got a swagger that doesn't translate. In Paris, it might be charming. In Marseille, it's a countdown. Stacks lights a cigar the moment he steps out of the terminal. The smoke billows around him like he's starring in his own noir flick. He's here on behalf of someone named Mikey 2 times, a name that sounds like a joke in this city. The Chicago outfit wants to diversify, and Marseille's heroin trade is tempting enough to ignore the cultural divide. They think it's just another market. They forget Marseille is a living animal, one with teeth. Stacks checks into the Hotel C2, flashes a money clip like it's a passport, and orders champagne to his room before unpacking. The bellboy leaves with a generous tip and a look that says, "This guy won't last a week." He's not wrong. Stacks is scheduled to meet with a few local businessmen. Tonio's name is on the list. So is someone else's. Le Chapeau's. He doesn't know that yet, but he will. Meanwhile, Le Chapeau is already watching. From the cafe across the street, he sees Stack's tan jacket bounce down the sidewalk like confidence on stilts. Sees the glint of a gun under his belt line, not even well hidden. Sees the way he speaks too loudly to a waiter who pretends not to understand English, but probably speaks 5 languages. Stacks orders a steak. Well done. Le Chapeau winces. Here's a grounded historical note. During the height of the French Connection, American crime families frequently sent ambassadors to Marseille to negotiate directly with Corsican syndicates. Most of them didn't understand the layered codes of conduct in the French underworld and some didn't survive long enough to learn. That night, Tonio holds a quiet dinner in the back room of a wine bar in the first arrondissement. No menus, just lamb, Bordeaux, and a lot of silences that mean more than words. Stax arrives late, calls Tonio Tony. Tonio doesn't smile. Le Chapeau is already seated. Says nothing. Stax doesn't notice him right away. He lights another cigar, this time without asking. Tonio leans forward, sharp as a blade. We don't smoke during the meal. Stax waves it off. You don't? Guess I'm breaking customs already. Le Chapeau finally speaks. You broke them at the airport. Stax blinks. Notices him now. And you are? The hat. Excuse me? Tonio leans back. You'll want to listen to him. The next 20 minutes are brutal. Not in volume, but in quiet corrections. Stax pitches partnerships, profit shares, territory splits. He speaks in dollars. Tonio and Le Chapeau respond in faces, in histories, in favors owed and silences maintained. Things that don't appear on ledgers. Stax doesn't get it. You guys still think you're running stuff like it's the 30s? He says with a laugh. Newsflash. Chicago's got more soldiers, more product, and more reach. Le Chapeau replies gently. Then why send you? Stax's smile fades. After the meal, Tonio leaves first. Le Chapeau stands. You shouldn't stay long, he says. Stax bristles. Is that a threat? No, it's advice. You guys are all the same, Stax mutters. Old stories, old grudges, old suits. Le Chapeau steps closer. You wore tan in a city built from stone. You ordered champagne with lamb. You talked more than you listened. And tomorrow, someone will try to rob you. Not because they hate you, but because they think you won't notice. He tips his hat, walks away. Stax doesn't sleep well, and with reason. The next morning his hotel room is ransacked. Nothing major stolen, just his passport and one shoe. A message. Le Chapeau never calls it in, never follows up. But the next day, the American checks out. Quietly. No champagne this time, no goodbyes. Just a cab ride to the airport, eyes darting toward every alley on the way. Many people still think American gangsters were untouchable. But in Marseille, swagger doesn't buy protection. So, what do you think? Did Stax make it home? Or did he vanish in customs like the others before him? Later, Madame Helene asks, was it worth scaring him? Le Chapeau reply, he wasn't scared enough. Then what was the point? Sometimes the point is just making sure the next one brings a better suit. They drink wine in silence. Outside, Marseille exhales, and someone else unpacks a suitcase. A truce is signed over expensive cigars, then quietly broken before dawn. It happens in a room with too much wood and too little soul. The wallpaper peels in the corners. The chandelier flickers when no one's touching the switch. But the table in the center? It gleams like a polished promise. Around it sit 4 men. 2 from the old Corsican families, 1 ex-police turned smuggler, and Tonio, who smells like leather and risk. Le Chapeau stands by the window, neither guest nor host, just present. The table is set with crystal glasses, Cuban cigars, and a bottle of Armagnac, old enough to remember wars that no one wants to talk about. The air is thick with posturing and cologne. The purpose of this gathering? Peace, or the version of it that men like these can stomach. The problem is, none of them trust each other. And trust, in Marseille, is often mistaken for sleepiness, until someone loses an eye. Let's not pretend we like each other, Tonio says, cutting into the first silence like a scalpel. We're here because we hate the same problems. One of the Corsicans nods, his face carved from Mediterranean stone. You're talking about the Algerian shipments? He asks. Tonio nods. And the American sniffing around, and raises leftovers, and whatever Dumas thinks he's doing from Paris. The ex-gendarme, a man with pale blue eyes and knuckles like pebbles, leans in. We split the streets. We set clear lines. No one crosses without an invitation. "And the docks?" someone asks. Le Chapeau finally speaks. "The docks stay neutral." Eyes turn to him. "Who decides that?" one of the Corsicans asks. He takes a slow drag from his cigarette. "I do." Historical sidebar. Worth your whisper. Truces between factions in Marseille's underworld were as common as rain, and just as temporary. These were not treaties. They were timers, written in smoke and sealed with nods that everyone knew wouldn't last past a threat. Still, tonight they sign. Ink on paper. Cigars are lit. Glasses clink. It looks like peace. Feels like boredom. And boredom, that's dangerous. Le Chapeau walks Madame Hélène home after the meeting. Her arm slips easily into his. "I didn't know you babysat now," she says with a smirk. "They're grown men, which means they'll need a nap and a reminder not to stab each other before breakfast." They part at her door. No kiss. Just a glance that says, "Stay alive." At 4 a.m, Le Chapeau is awoken by the sound of tires skidding, followed by shouting. Then silence. He dresses slowly. Down the street, just past the pharmacy, 2 men lie face down in the gutter. One breathes. The other doesn't. The one who breathes is wearing a jacket from the ex-gendarme's crew. The one who doesn't? Corsican. Le Chapeau kneels, touches the man's neck. No pulse. Gunshot to the back. Execution, not accident. By sunrise, the truce is dust. Galois arrives as the body's being loaded into a van. "You were at the meeting," he says flatly. "So were 6 others. Only 1 body so far." Le Chapeau stares at the sunrise. Then it was a good night. Many people still think crime families break peace over power. But it's rarely that. It's usually pride, or paranoia, or one man with a gun and a short temper who didn't get the memo. So what do you think? Was this a planned betrayal, or a mistake someone's about to pay for? By noon, Tonio sends word. Don't retaliate, yet. Le Chapeau doesn't respond. Instead, he visits Leo. The boy is playing with chalk in the alley behind a bakery, drawing something that looks like a city, but maybe it's a map. "They killed someone again, didn't they?" he asks without turning. "Yes. Was it someone important?" "Everyone is, until they're not." Leo draws a line through his city. "Then make them stop." "How?" "You're the man in the hat. People listen to you." Le Chapeau kneels. "No, people watch me, then do what they wanted anyway." The boy shrugs. "Then don't be watchable." Back at home, Le Chapeau opens the file again. Not the old Corsican ledgers. The photo. The one with Madame Hélène. And the handwriting. Choose. It's not about sides anymore. It's about what's coming, and what survives when it arrives. That evening, he burns the truce. Literally. Page by page, smoke curling up into the Marseille night. Not because he doesn't believe in peace, but because he doesn't believe in pretending. Le Chapeau navigate Marseille's triangle of influence with uneasy grace. Marseille isn't run by one man, not even close. It's run by 3 forces, each pulling the city in a different direction. They don't meet in official buildings or high-rises. They meet in whispers, behind curtains, over glasses of vermouth and bowls of lentils, and each has Le Chapeau on speed dial. The first is the clergy. Old, wrinkled, and far less innocent than they pretend. They control the silence of confessions and the loyalty of the frightened. Father Gabriel is their voice, a priest with gold-threaded cuffs and a crucifix heavy enough to break windows. The second is the police. Not all of them, just the ones who know how the real city works. Galois, of course. He's the reluctant voice of a machine that's constantly rearranging its own gears. Every now and then, he still tries to do his job, but more often, he tries to keep the body count under double digits. The third is the underworld, the gangs, the old families, the ones who remember who ran the docks before democracy arrived with cameras and questions. Tonio speaks for them, but only when it's convenient. Le Chapeau, he doesn't speak for anyone, which makes him more useful and more dangerous. This morning, He meets Father Gabriel in a chapel that smells of incense and memory. The pews are empty. The altar flickers with weak candlelight. No one says amen here anymore. Just names. "You've been busy," the priest says. "I've been quiet." "Same thing." Father Gabriel pours tea. "No wine. Not at this hour." "There's a list," he says. "There's always a list. This one has Elaine on it." Le Chapeau doesn't move. "She's done nothing," Gabriel continues, "but someone's decided she will." "Who?" The priest sips his tea. "If I knew they'd be on the list instead." Here's something not in the tourist guides. The Catholic Church in Marseille has long had fingers in places the Vatican pretends don't exist. Housing arrangements for smugglers, laundering for stolen art, and shelter for men who can't confess what they've done because there are no words in any language for it. Le Chapeau stands. "I'll take care of it." "Will you kill them?" "I'll do what keeps her off the list." As he leaves the church, a woman is lighting a candle. He doesn't recognize her, but she looks at him like she recognizes him. At noon, he meets Galois in a cafe that charges too much for coffee and not enough for silence. "Two dead," Galois says, not even pretending to ease in. "Corsican, shot in the back, in their own car." "Who?" "Rivals of Tonio." "Then ask him." "I'd rather ask you. I wasn't invited." Galois leans forward. "The mayor's breathing down my neck. He's scared Paris is watching." "They are. And they're waiting for a name." "You already have names. I need one that makes headlines." Le Chapeau finishes his coffee. "Then make one up." Galois chuckles bitterly. "You know, if I didn't hate your guts, I'd admire you." "Same." They part without shaking hands. That night, Tonio calls. He's not in his usual bar. He's somewhere quieter, a laundromat of all places. "I'm pulling out," he says. "You don't pull out." "This is different." "How?" "They've started asking about the kid." "Leo?" "They don't know his name. Not yet. But they know he runs messages for someone." Le Chapeau doesn't respond. Tonio continues. "You've drawn a target, Chapeau. One bigger than you can dodge." "I always dodge." This one doesn't miss. Many people still think power comes from fear. But real power in a place like Marseille comes from navigation, knowing which fear to lean into and which to walk away from. So what do you think? Can a man who answers to no one still serve everyone? Back in his apartment, Le Chapeau lights a candle. It's not for prayer. It's a signal. He places it in the window, just out of sight. In the street below, a boy sees it, then disappears into the crowd. Tomorrow, Le Chapeau will meet with someone who hasn't spoken in years. Not because he can't, because he's been watching. And tonight, Marseille exhales, and the triangle tilts just slightly out of balance. A woman vanishes, returns, and vanishes again, each time shifting Le Chapeau's moral compass. It begins with a knock, not the kind Leo uses, not the kind Tonio sends. This one's slower, softer, like a question that's already been answered. Le Chapeau opens the door. She stands there in a red coat, soaked from the rain, lipstick smudged just enough to suggest haste. Her eyes, green, furious, and familiar. "Do you remember me?" she asks. He doesn't answer right away. He studies her face like an old crime scene, recognizable but buried under new layers. Then, "Eva," she exhales, like she was holding that name inside her for years. "I need your help," she says. Of course she does. She did the last time too. 15 years ago, Eva vanished after a job gone sideways in Tangier. She'd run weapons, secrets, and once, Le Chapeau's trust right into the hands of someone who paid better. Or so it seemed. Now she's back, or someone shaped like her. He steps aside. She walks in like she owns the floor, sits on his couch, and lights a cigarette without asking. "You're thinner," she says. "You're wetter." He tosses her a towel. She uses it like someone who's never wiped anything she didn't first break. "I was in Lyon," she says. "They're watching people. They're watching you." "Everyone watches me. Not like this." She hands him a photo. Surveillance quality. Blurry, but clear enough to show Le Chapeau stepping out of a car in front of Madame Helene's apartment. This was pinned to my door this morning. Who pinned it? I don't know, but they want to use me to get to you. He stares at the photo, then at her. You used to need better reasons. I have one now. She stands, removes a small envelope from her coat, sets it on the table. Inside, coordinates, a name, a date, and something else. Something that makes his blood go colder than it should. A photo of Leo, alone, on a bench. Here's a darker corner of the truth. In post-colonial France, intelligence services often outsourced dirty work to freelance operatives, men and women like Ava. They were untraceable, disposable. But sometimes they came back. And when they did, they brought ghosts. Le Chapeau cite. What do they want? You to do what? Nothing. They want me not to act. She nods. For now. And if I do? She looks away. Then the boy vanishes. Again, he pours them both a drink. She takes hers neat, the same as always. They sit in silence for a while, until she says, I didn't betray you back then. You didn't have to. Maybe not. He studies her face. There's still a scar under her ear. She used to say it came from a jealous man in Algiers. He always suspected it was something deeper. You staying long? He asks. I'll be gone before morning. Again. It's what I do. The clock ticks in the background like a bomb running out of patience. She finishes her drink, stands, walks to the window. You shouldn't have taken in the boy. He took me in. You're not made for softness. He smirks. Neither were you. She turns, her voice quieter. You're not the man I left. I wasn't then either. She leaves. No goodbye. No threat. Just gone. Again. Many people still think betrayal is final. That once someone leaves, that chapter closes. But in lives built from shadows, chapters fold back in on themselves. So what do you think? Can someone vanish twice and still be telling the truth? That night he doesn't sleep. He rereads the envelope contents. The name, the coordinates, the boy's photo. Then he burns it all, slowly. The only thing he keeps? The name, it's French. Short, not one he's heard in years, but enough to send him reaching for his gun. The next morning, Madame Helene greets him with a frown. You saw her. He nods. And? She still lies like it's breathing. But not all of it was a lie. She pours coffee. You're going to chase this, aren't you? I have to. For the boy, for the balance. She sighs. You were more manageable when you had nothing left to lose. I still don't. But now you care, that's worse. Outside, the rain starts again. Le Chapeau puts on his hat and wonders if someone comes back from the dead, who buries them the second time? He takes a night shift on the pier, remembering lost friends, wars, and faces that won't come back. The rain has stopped, but the fog rolls in heavy, thick enough to swallow sound, thick enough to bury time. Le Chapeau walks the length of Pier 3 like a man visiting old ghosts. His coat flaps gently in the wind, the wool hat pulled low. The port is half asleep. One ship creaks against the mooring ropes. Another loads cargo slowly, reluctantly. Everything smells like brine and diesel and waiting. He's not here to work. But he told the right man, an old friend with a limp and a memory for faces, and a shift opened up. No paperwork, just a nod, a flashlight, and the keys to a booth where dock logs go to gather dust. He sits in the booth, looks out at the black water, then opens the drawer. Inside, a single ledger, nothing coded, nothing criminal, just logs of who arrived and when. But as he flips through the pages, the names start to mean more than they should. Air Louvier, Chez Casal, Ikamis, men he once bled with, fought beside. Some who died in the jungle, some who vanished in the sands of Algeria. A few who came back only to die in bars, forgotten, surrounded by men who still called them hero, even while stealing their coats. Le Chapeau closed the book. He He doesn't need reminders. They follow him already. He steps outside. The sea wind slaps him once, then settles into his coat like an old dog curling up. Out past the buoys, a freighter honks twice, low and mournful. He remembers one like that, a ship called La Marianne, full of crates no one opened, full of men who didn't ask questions because they knew the answers would smell of blood. He remembers a man named Bel Hassan, Tunisian, quick hands, brilliant laugh, dead before 24, shot in the back over a misunderstanding with a Parisian bureaucrat whose name didn't make the report. Le Chapeau takes out a cigarette, doesn't light it, just holds it between his fingers like a relic. Here's your human history flash. France's colonial wars left behind more than casualties. They left behind habits of secrecy, of violence, of men taught to obey, then abandoned when obedience no longer served. Many drifted into crime, not for greed, but because it was the only map that still had their name on it. A voice pulls him from the fog. You always look like you're waiting for someone. It's Galois. The inspector leans against a shipping crate, coat soaked, hands bare. He doesn't light a cigarette either. Just breathes. I could arrest you, he says, not trying very hard. You could, Le Chapeau replies. They stand in silence. Then Galois speaks again. I found her, Eva. Le Chapeau doesn't look at him. She left Marseille this morning, train to Perpignan, solo. I know. She left this, Galois says, handing over a photograph. It's old, too old. It shows Le Chapeau, Eva, and Bel Hassan. Young, smiling, arms around shoulders like hope was still a thing they believed in. She wanted you to remember, Galois mutters. I never forgot. You looked happy. We weren't. Galois shrugs. Still nice to pretend. Le Chapeau folds the photo carefully, slips it into his coat like a confession. Then why'd you come? To tell you that Bresson is making moves again. Against Tonio? Against you. Le Chapeau exhale. Of course he is. Galois hesitates. You could leave. I tried. And? The city kept my name. Many people still think you can outrun the past. But in cities like Marseille, the past doesn't chase you. It waits. So what do you think? Does a man like him walk these piers out of memory? Or because there's no other place left to go? Later, a bell rings. Somewhere inland, shift change. But no one comes to replace him. He stays, watches the horizon. The clouds drift low. He thinks of Bel Hassan, of Eva, of the boy Leo, whose name is now scrawled on the edges of someone else's map. And he thinks about how long it takes to become a myth, and how quickly a myth gets replaced. Behind him, the warehouse doors groan. Another crate arrives. He doesn't ask what's inside. Some questions only lead to forgetting what matters. The sea keeps breathing. And Le Chapeau? He remains. Someone buries an empty coffin with full honors. And Le Chapeau is the only mourner who knows the truth. The cemetery lies just beyond the city's noise, tucked behind a grove of cypress trees that don't grow straight. Nothing in Marseille grows straight. The gates creak open reluctantly as Le Chapeau steps through. Dressed in a black coat, he reserves only for the dead. There are no crowds, just a priest, a gravedigger, and 3 men in suits pretending to grieve. The coffin is polished mahogany, heavy, too heavy considering what it doesn't contain. The plaque says Abdelrahmi, 1933-1969. The date of death is a lie. So is the coffin. Abdel's body was never found. Not fully. A glove, a smear, a key, but someone, maybe Tonio, maybe one of the dockside ghosts, decided he deserved a funeral anyway. Maybe it was for appearances, maybe guilt, maybe respect. Le Chapeau stands at the back, hat in hand, eyes still. He doesn't pray, just watches. The priest mumbles something about peace and eternal rest. The words float upward like smoke with no fire. Afterward, the 3 suited men disappear into a waiting car, too clean for this part of town. The gravedigger lights a cigarette. Knew him? He asks without looking. Yes. He was quiet, Most good men are. They lower the empty box into the ground. No family came. No flowers. Just weightless closure. Le Chapeau walks over to the headstone, kneels, touches the earth, and whispers a name that isn't written there. Farid, because that was Abdel's real name. Here's something few records tell. Many North African immigrants in 1960s France used different names on papers than in life. Sometimes to get work, sometimes to avoid police, sometimes because the name they were born with didn't fit the world they were forced into. Farid had worked the docks. He'd laughed once. Le Chapeau remembered that. A quiet, chest-deep laugh, rare as rain in the dry season. He didn't ask for trouble, but he asked questions. And in Marseille, that's worse. Le Chapeau stands, walks away from the grave without looking back. Halfway down the path, a woman appears. She's in her 60s, wrapped in a shawl, eyes sharp and dark. She doesn't cry. She doesn't speak, just hands him an envelope, then walks past. He opens it. Inside, a photograph, black and white, taken from a high angle. It shows Farid, alive, shaking hands with someone outside a customs office. The man beside him, Bresson. And on the back of the photo, one word, collaboration. So that's what it was. Farid had known too much, maybe even worked with the wrong people, until the guilt or the greed tipped. Maybe he'd tried to leave, or tried to confess, and someone decided the sea was quieter than a courtroom. That night, Le Chapeau visits Madame Hélène. Her record player hums softly, a scratchy violin piece that keeps forgetting where it's going. He hands her the photo. She studies it. I thought Bresson was a pragmatist, she says. He is. Then why kill a man who was willing to work with him? Because maybe he stopped being willing. She nods. Or maybe he remembered his real name. They don't speak for a while. Then she asks, "Do you think someone will bury you one day?" "Not in a box. And not empty." He smiles faintly. "I wouldn't bet on either. Many people still think the dead stop mattering once they're buried. But in cities like this, an empty coffin can cause more trouble than a full one." So what do you think? Was Farid's death justice, betrayal, or just a message lost in translation? Later, he walks back toward the port. The wind carries salt, smoke, and maybe something else. Memory, perhaps, or regret. He passes by the cafe where Farid used to drink mint tea in the mornings, folded newspaper under his arm. The table is empty, but the chair is still pulled out, as if waiting. He sits for a moment, not long, then stands and walks away. An old man's game becomes a cover for whispered warnings and subtle threats in the park. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across Parc Borelli. The gravel paths shimmer with dust kicked up by careless joggers, and the scent of blooming jasmine mixes with the old linen musk of retired men and plastic thermoses. It's here, under the whispering plane trees, that Marseille pretends to be innocent for an hour or two. Pétanque is underway. 2 teams, 3 spectators. A flask passed like a secret. The metal balls clang softly against one another, settling like punctuation on a sentence no one will say aloud. Le Chapeau watches from a bench, his coat folded neatly beside him, his hat tilted just enough to avoid conversation. He's not here for the sport. He's here for the players, especially the one in the blue vest with the silver beard and a limp on his right side. Marcel Duret, a retired customs officer who once handled paperwork for ships that didn't exist. His file was redacted long before Le Chapeau ever held a fake passport. But today he plays pétanque and watches the watchers. As Marcel tosses his boulet, it lands perfectly beside the cochonnet, the tiny wooden target ball. He smiles faintly, that same smug little smirk he wore when signing off illegal manifests with a shrug and a glass of brandy. Le Chapeau approaches slowly, not to interrupt, just to be seen. Marcel squints. Well, he says. Still alive? For now. Shame about Farid. Le Chapeau doesn't react. You knew him? Everyone did. Until he started asking about the wrong crates. They walk, casually, no sudden moves. Two old acquaintances pretending to discuss sports. Marcel sips from the flask, offers it. Le Chapeau declines. You buried an empty box, Marcel says. Better than an empty man, Marcel chuckles. Philosophy, that's new for you. I'm getting sentimental. I heard, here's your slow-burning history note. Retired port officials were often the most dangerous men in Marseille. They weren't active players, but they knew where all the bones were buried and which ones had teeth. They didn't move product anymore. They moved stories. As they reach the bench under the far tree, Marcel lowers his voice. You're being watched, but not by Galois. I know. They've brought in someone from Lyon. Another Dumas puppet? No, a cleanup man, a real one. Government issue. What's he after? Marcel shrugs. Maybe the boy, maybe the priest, maybe you. Depends on what they think the threat is. Le Chapeau studies him. You know more than you're saying. I know enough to retire with my kneecaps intact. A pause. Then Marcel looks at him. Really looks. You should disappear, Chapeau, like the others. I'm not one of the others. You're a man with too many ghosts and not enough bullets. And yet, Marcel shakes his head. You're not the same as before. No, but I'm still necessary. Maybe. But Marseille doesn't want necessary. It wants invisible. The pétanque match ends. Cheers from the other side of the court. A toast, a laugh. Someone claps too loudly. Marcel pat Le Chapeau's shoulder once, surprisingly gentle. Then, if I were you, I'd go see Father Gabriel. Today. He walks away, leaving only a trace of cologne and something colder. Concern. Le Chapeau sits back on the bench, watches the players reset. The metal balls gleam like tiny planets in a solar system no one controls. And beneath the surface of this slow-motion afternoon, threats, lies, and one final warning wrapped in an old man's game. Many people still think violence announces itself with gunfire. But in Marseille, violence often wears a smile and tosses steel balls through gravel while the world sips wine. So what do you think? Does calm mean safety here? Or does it just mean the crosshairs haven't closed yet? Later that day, Le Chapeau walks to the church. Father Gabriel is sweeping the steps. He doesn't stop when Le Chapeau arrives. You look like hell, the priest says. I visited the park. Ah, Gabriel says, where sin retires. They go inside. The light through the stained glass washes the floor in fractured color. I heard they're sending someone, Le Chapeau says. You heard right. Who? Doesn't matter. They want me out? Or they want to use you? The priest sits in the front pew. Do you know why I became a man of God? He asks. Because you were tired of being a man of someone else. Gabriel chuckles. They asked me to bless a name this morning, he says. Whose? Yours. From who? Gabriel lifts his eyes and says nothing. That's all the answer he needs. A carefully staged accident removes a thorn from the underworld's side and adds weight to Le Chapeau's shoulders. The call comes at dawn, not from a phone, from a knock. One slow thud, then silence, then two more, softer. Not police, not Tonio, but someone who still believes in coded rhythms. Le Chapeau opens the door. Leo stands there, eyes wide, breath visible in the cold morning air. There's been something. He doesn't have to finish the sentence. An hour later, Le Chapeau stands on the edge of a cliff, just south of the Prado beaches. Below, the water churns gently against the jagged rocks. What remains of the car, an old gray Peugeot, is lodged nose first into the sea, waves lapping at its crumpled doors like curious fingers. The police are already there. So is Galois. He doesn't look surprised to see Le Chapeau. They're calling it an accident, Galois says. Who's in the car? Bresson. Le Chapeau doesn't blink, just breathes. No skid marks, no brake trail. Galois continues. No blood at the wheel, no glass in his hair. So someone pushed the car in. They stand in silence as a diver hauls a waterlogged bag from the back seat. Inside, documents, mostly fake, a few not. One of them has Le Chapeau's name on it. He watches Galois tuck the papers away before anyone else sees. No questions? the inspector asks. No answers, Le Chapeau replies. Here's your historical echo. In 1960s Marseille, accidents were a favorite cover for eliminations. The city's roads, cliffs, and coastlines provided the perfect theater. A crash here, a slip there. A man disappears into the sea, and everyone pretends they weren't the ones who whispered it should happen. That afternoon, Le Chapeau visits Madame Hélène. She's already poured the wine. You heard? Everyone's heard. Anyone asking? No one who matters. She hands him a cigarette. He doesn't smoke it. Just holds it like a thread he's thinking of pulling. Was it you? She asks. No. But you knew? Only this morning. She studies him. You're getting slower. I'm getting older. She looks out the window. I hope he didn't suffer. He never saw it coming. She nods. Then it was a kindness. They sit in silence. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls. Somewhere else, a dog barks and doesn't stop. The city continues its casual unraveling. Then, you're heavier now, she says. I didn't touch him. You didn't stop it either. He finishes his wine, sets the glass down gently. Later, he walks to the garage where Bresson's car was last seen before the incident. The mechanic there is a man named Serge. Too skinny, too nervous, always humming. You serviced it last? Le Chapeau asks. Serge nods. Yesterday. Who picked it up? Not him. Courier didn't sign. Face, glasses, gloves quiet. You get a plate? Serge hesitates, then slides a slip of paper across the workbench. A license number. Parisian. Le Chapeau pockets it. Leaves without paying. Back on the street, he turns the number over in his head. Paris, again. Always Paris. Many people still think justice in the underworld comes with fanfare. But Marseille has always preferred the quiet fall. A car, a tide, a few words left unspoken. So what do you think? Was Bresson's death justice? Or did the city simply grow tired of his weight? That evening, Galois visits the church. Father Gabriel meets him at the door. Coming to confess? The priest asks. Coming to warn. Then come in. They sit in the same pew Le Chapeau used days ago. Galois says, You were on Bresson's list. Gabriel smiles faintly. I've been on many lists. He was about to turn, spill everything. Names, files, debts. Then, the sea. The priest folds his hands. Then someone saved him from his own mouth. Galois nods. There will be more, the priest says. I know. Outside, the wind shifts, and from a rooftop across the street, Le Chapeau watches. Not to protect, not to threaten, just to witness, because sometimes that's all he has left. A secret ledger emerges, tracking favors owed, debts paid, and those still living on borrowed time. The rain starts again around midnight. Not the kind that cleans, the kind that soaks into the bones of old buildings and older men. It rattles drain pipes and drums across rooftops like a warning someone forgot to send. Le Chapeau walks through it, coat pulled close, wool hat dripping. His destination is a tailor shop in Le Panier, closed for years, officially. But unofficially, it's still a place where pockets are stitched with secrets. The bell above the door doesn't ring anymore. Just thuds, dull and tired. Inside, the shelves are empty. Bolts of cloth long removed, scissors dull with disuse. But in the back room, past the curtain, behind the false wall, there's a safe. He knows the code. Didn't ask for it. Someone gave it to him weeks ago. A woman with a red coat and a past she wasn't finished ruining. He turns the dial. Clicks. The door groans open. Inside, a single object. A leather ledger bound with twine and age. He places it on the table. Wipes the cover. It smells of ink, mildew, and something heavier. Memory. He opens it. The handwriting is cramped, meticulous. French, Corsican, Arabic. Whole pages of names. Some crossed out, some circled, some annotated with tiny, terrifying notations. Still breathing, but not for long. owes 3 bodies and a favor in Nice. Paid in blood, not forgiven. Near the back, his name. Not Le Chapeau, his real name. A name no one speaks anymore. The one he buried in a trench years ago and left behind with a duffel bag and a broken tooth. Beside it, cleared, except one. One what? One favor? One debt? One betrayal? He flips back to the beginning, recognizes names. Tonio, Hélène, Galois, Evan Father Gabriel, and beneath all of them, debts, old ones. Cross-referenced with dates that line up with headlines no longer in circulation. He reaches the final page. It's blank, except for a line centered at the top. When the book closes, so do the accounts. Here's your murky fact of the night. Ledgers like these did exist, not just in Marseille, but in every major European crime city of the post-war era. Not financial ledgers, favor ledgers. Books that told who lived, who died, and who could be traded for silence. Some were real, some became myths, but all were feared. He closes the book slowly, wraps it in his coat, walks out into the rain. He doesn't take it home. He doesn't take it to Hélène. He takes it to a café on Rue des Réformés, a place where the espresso is bitter and the clientele bitterer, and waits. 15 minutes later, a man arrives. Square frame, long coat, surgical smile. Not from Marseille, from Lyon. You have it? He asks, sitting without greeting. Le Chapeau placed the book on the table. The man reaches for it. Le Chapeau pulls it back. One question, he says. The man nods. The line at the end, so do the accounts. Is it true? Yes. And what happens when they're wrong? The man shrugs. Then someone rewrites the book. They sit in silence. Rain patters against the windows. Finally, Le Chapeau slides the ledger across. The man takes it, doesn't open it, just stands. Tips his hat like a banker collecting a final payment. You'll be notified, he says. Of what? What's left? Many people still think death in the underworld is spontaneous. Gunshots, stabbings, poison slipped into a drink. But the truth is, the real deaths are bureaucratic, inked into ledgers, measured out in owed favors and outdated allegiances. So what do you think? Was giving up the ledger an end, or just another beginning? Later that night, Le Chapeau sits with Hélène, tells her nothing, but she knows anyway. You're lighter, she says, only by 0.5 kilogram. You gave something away. I gave something back. She studies him over the rim of her glass. Are you afraid? No, but I think I'm visible again. Outside, the rain finally stops, and the city, for once, feels like it's waiting. After one killing too many, Marseille begins to whisper about whether he's still in control. Marseille is not a city of silence, but now, when Le Chapeau walks through the streets, the conversations hush just slightly. A pause here, a glance there. At the markets, the vendors nod, but a little too quickly. At the cafes, the waiters serve him, but their hands tremble, just faintly. Even the stray dogs avoid his shadow, because something has changed, not in him, around him. It starts with a murder. Not his, not even one he ordered, but one everyone thinks he should have stopped. A boy, 17. Name, Marco Corsi. Petty runner. Too fast with his mouth, too slow with his choices. He was found in an alley off Rue d'Aubagne, eyes open, one hand missing. No one says who did it, but everyone knows the boy once delivered a note for Le Chapeau. Once. Months ago. Enough to be remembered, enough to die. Now the whispers begin. He's slipping. He's not as clean as they say. Maybe he ordered it. Maybe he didn't, but didn't stop it either. Galois shows up that afternoon. No coat. Just the weariness of a man who's been doing paperwork for 12 straight hours and still can't find what he needs. You hear? He asks. I heard. You know who did it? No. Wanna guess? No. Galois lights a cigarette. The city thinks you're losing your grip. I never had one. That's not what they say. Then they've forgotten how this place works. Galois exhales slowly. If they think you're weak, they'll test you. I know. Here's a truth Marseille hides in its gutters. Power doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes. Quietly. Death by rumor, by hesitation, by someone not returning your call fast enough. The moment people stop fearing you is the moment they start writing your obituary. Le Chapeau walks to the port that evening. The air smells of oil and salt and worry. He finds Tonio sitting on a stack of crates, eating cold stew from a tin. You hear about the boy? Tonio asks, not looking up. Yes. You think it was Dumas? Maybe. You think it was one of ours? Also maybe. Tonio throws the tin. It clatters across the pavement like a scream that no one wants to claim. You should do something, he says. I did.
What?
I waited. Tonio turns. And they buried him without shoes. They sit in silence. Ships groan in the distance. Finally, Tonio speaks. You remember when people used to thank you? I remember when they didn't flinch. Tonio spits. Now they flinch when you don't. Later, Le Chapeau visits Madame Hélène. She opens the door before he knocks. You're being watched again, she says. I always am. No, I mean closely. He steps inside. She pours whiskey, not wine, not tonight. He holds the glass, doesn't drink. You're thinking about leaving, she says. No. Then you're thinking about what happens if you don't. She's not wrong. He sits, pulls out a folded note, hands it to her. It's a list. 6 names, 3 circled. One of them is his. What is this? She asks. A hit list. Who wrote it? No signature. Are you sure it's real? I'm sure it's old. Many people still think that the moment you see your name on a list, you disappear. But sometimes, seeing it is what keeps you alive. So what do you think? Does Le Chapeau fear death? Or does he just resent the paperwork that comes with it? That night, he walks the city, not for strategy, for memory. He walks past the cafe where Farid used to smile, past the corner where Ava kissed him once, years ago, when they still believed in the future, past the bench where Leo drew chalk cities and whispered dreams he didn't know were fragile. He stops beneath a flickering street lamp, waits. Someone steps out of the dark, not to kill him, to hand him a note, folded, sealed, wax stamped. He doesn't open it right away, just stares at the messenger. A woman, maybe 25. No fear in her eyes, just recognition. She says, they want a meeting. He nods. When? Tomorrow docks, midnight. She walks away, and in her wake the whispers seem louder than ever. An unexpected visitor from Lyon knows what Le Chapeau did before the hat. And he wants something. The sky over Marseille hangs like damp linen, thick with a heat that has nowhere to go. By nightfall, the docks are quiet, but not empty. Cranes creak in place. The water glistens like it's hiding something. It probably is. Le Chapeau arrives early, always does. He stands in the same place he always does when meetings are scheduled to go wrong. A rusted balcony overlooking Pier 5, high enough to see trouble, low enough to join it. Midnight passes. At 12:14, footsteps echo. A man walks into the light, no suit, no weapon visible, but the way he carries himself says both are close by. He's about Le Chapeau's age, but cleaner. Civilian clean. Bureaucrat clean. The man stops 10 feet away and smiles. I knew you were still alive. Le Chapeau doesn't smile back. I didn't know Lion was sending ghosts. Not a ghost, the man says. A clerk? Then why not use the mail? The man shrugs. Some things need a face. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a small envelope. Inside, a photograph. Le Chapeau, younger, clean-shaven, in uniform, military. He recognizes the photo. Not because he remembers it being taken, but because he knows who took it. You kept records, Le Chapeau says. Of course we did. France always keeps receipts. Here's your context for the curtain behind the curtain. In the 1950s and early 60s, men like Le Chapeau did not just vanish from service. They were erased. especially those who worked unofficial jobs during colonial conflicts. But some files remained, deep, dirty, and sometimes for sale. What do you want? Le Chapeau asks. The man steps closer. Names from your ledger, the one you handed over. I gave it up. We know, but you read it. And some of those debts, they involve people who now hold office, people who don't like being on lists. Le Chapeau studies him. You're not here for the past, he says. You're here to secure the future. The Lion Man nods. There's an election coming. You understand. What's in it for me? Security. Le Chapeau chuckles. You're offering me not to be hunted? Among other things. He steps closer again. I know your name, he says. You're late to the party. I know what you did in Blida. That stops the world for a breath. You think I care? Le Chapeau replies softly. I think you don't want to care. But the boy, Leo, he doesn't know that name, does he? Silence. The Lion Man continues. Give us what we need. In return, your past stays in Lion. The boy stays safe. And you fade. And if I don't? You already know what happens if you don't. They stand in silence for a while. The city mutters in the distance. Sirens, wind, the occasional gull crying like a drunk searching for home. Finally, Le Chapeau steps forward. You came here without a weapon? I was told you were a professional. I am. He holds out his hand. The man hesitates, then shakes it. Firm, forgettable. Le Chapeau grips tighter. Just enough to leave a bruise. One question, he says. Of course. Who told you I'd listen? The man smiles. Everyone in Lion listens to ghosts. He walks away, not fast, but carefully. Le Chapeau watches him go, and doesn't follow. Many people still think the past is something you bury. But in places like Marseille, the past isn't in the ground. It's walking around in other people's coats. So what do you think? If someone knows your real name, do they own you? Or just give you a choice you never wanted? Later that night, he returns to his apartment. Leo is asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around a book he probably doesn't understand, but pretends to read because it makes him feel older. Le Chapeau stands in the doorway for a long time, then walks into the kitchen, opens a drawer, pulls out a folded piece of paper. It's blank. He writes a name, his real name, then folds it again, slides it into the back of the boy's book behind the last page, just in case. In the morning, it'll still be there, or not. Either way, someone will know. And the name once whispered in places that no longer exist will still be breathing, just not out loud. An old truth returns full circle, and Le Chapeau finally removes the hat, for good. The morning arrives without fanfare, just light filtering through dirty windows, and the low hum of a city not quite ready to confess what it did while everyone else slept. Le Chapeau wakes early, earlier than usual. Leo is still asleep, sprawled sideways across the sofa like someone fighting invisible enemies in his dreams. One arm hangs off the edge, fingers twitching now and then. Le Chapeau watches him for a moment, then walks into the kitchen. Makes coffee the old way, black, bitter, unapologetic. The stovetop murmurs. The tin cup wobbles. Everything smells like endings. He pulls out a small radio, turns the dial. Static, then music. A scratchy accordion, old even by Marseille standards. He doesn't smile, but the corner of his mouth lifts. A knock at the door. Not soft, not threatening, just final. He opens it. Madame Helene stands there, coat buttoned, face tired but sharp. They're coming, she says. I know. They asked me to tell you. Did you? No. They followed you? I let them. He steps aside. She enters. Doesn't remove her coat. Just looks around. The apartment is clean. Almost too clean. No photos, no trophies. Just a few books, a coat rack, and the boy. Are you ready? She asks. I think I was always ready. She walks over to Leo, brushes the hair from his forehead. He's still dreaming, she says. I hope he always is. He finishes his coffee, puts on his coat, but not the hat. Instead, he sets it down on the table. Carefully, like it's breakable. He doesn't need it anymore. The knock comes again, firmer this time. Galois walks in, 2 uniforms behind him, no weapons drawn. Galois looks at Le Chapeau, then at the boy, then at the hat. Leaving that behind? He asks. Yes. You sure? No, but it's time. Galois nods. You're not under arrest. I didn't think I was. But you're going to be elsewhere. I understand. Galois walks him to the door, stops, hands him a file. Thin, no name on the cover, just a date, 1962. You don't have to read it, Galois says. I already know what's in it. I thought you might. Le Chapeau tucks it into his coat, steps outside. The city greets him quietly. No one stares. No one follows. It's as if Marseille itself has decided to let him go. They walk together. Galois, Le Chapeau, and the 2 men who don't know which legend they're escorting. They reach the black car parked just outside Rue de la République. Galois opens the door. Before getting in, Le Chapeau turns back, looks up at the window. The boy is awake now, forehead pressed to the glass, eyes wide. He waves once. Le Chapeau nods, then gets in. The door closes with a quiet thud. The engine starts. The car pulls away. Here's the last truth you'll need tonight. In cities like Marseille, the most powerful men aren't the loudest or the richest. They're the ones who learn when to leave before the silence eats them. Some vanish in fire, some in water, and some just walk away while their name still echoes. Many people still think the hat was the myth. But maybe it wasn't the hat. Maybe it was the man who knew when to take it off. So, what do you think? Was Le Chapeau the last of something, or the first to realize it was already over? Back in the apartment, Leo picks up the hat, feels its weight, looks at the book. The last page feels thicker than it should. He opens it, finds the folded paper, unfolds it, reads the name, says it out loud once, whispers it a second time, then smiles, and places the hat gently on the hook by the door, not as a costume, but as a memory. The rain begins again, soft, forgiving, and the city sleeps just a little easier. The rain falls softer now. The streets of Marseille glisten under pale street lamps. Their reflections stretch like ghosts across the old stones, and the city seems to breathe slower, calmer, almost as if it too is finally resting. Far above the docks, where the gulls no longer cry and the cranes stand still like forgotten giants, a boy closes a book. Not because the story is finished, but because he finally understands it. The man they called Le Chapeau never really belonged to anyone. Not to the city, not to the war, not even to the underworld that feared him. He belonged only to the quiet moments, the ones filled with cigarette smoke, echoing footsteps, and unsent letters. And now those moments have passed, but they didn't vanish. They became part of Marseille's rhythm, just like the sea, just like the fog, just like a hat left behind on a hook near the door. So now, wherever you are, whether it's 3:17 in Chicago or 11:42 in Manila, breathe deep. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight slip off. There's nothing left to chase tonight, just the sound of the rain, and the knowing that somewhere, a man once walked away, and that was enough. Sleep well.